Do you know the secret to a longer, healthier life? And if you do you know how to get there? On episode 722 of the 40 Plus Fitness podcast, we meet David Vaux and discuss his book, Stronger: How to Build Strength, the Secret to a Longer, Healthier Life. Welcome to the 40 Plus Fitness podcast, the largest and longest running health and fitness podcast dedicated to people over 40. Whether you're looking to lose weight, get stronger, or improve your health and age better, this podcast is for you. I'm your host, Coach Allan, an online health and fitness coach and author of The Wellness Roadmap. Each week, we dive into practical tips, expert advice, and inspiring stories to help you take control of your health and fitness. If you're ready to look, feel, and perform your best, no matter your age, this podcast is the perfect place to start. Let's get you on the path to a healthier, fitter, and more energetic version of yourself. I hope you'll join us each week, and together we can unlock your full potential. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the 40 Plus Fitness podcast. I'm really happy you're here today. I want to start out by wishing you, if you're in the United States and you celebrate, I want to wish you happy Thanksgiving. I know this is a time of year that you spend with family, and that's really important. You know, particularly we're looking at health and longevity, those relationships, those connections, those social things. Really, really important. So enjoy this holiday this week. If you're off, that's awesome. Enjoy every minute of it. We have many moments where we really can seek out joy. And this is that time of year when it's going to be as easy as it gets. So spend some time, connect with family, and find joy in everything you do. For me, I'm actually pretty happy, and you might be hearing that in my voice. And what it is basically today is close day on my mother's house, and so I've moved out. I'm actually staying in a hotel right now, and we close today, the day this goes live. And then again, here I am doing happy dances because this is the big domino that basically takes me to being able to close out my mother's estate and go back to focus and get out of this cold weather and spend time, be back with my wife. It's been a tough year. And I know if you've listened to the podcast, you've kind of followed me through some of that, but I'm excited because again, this is the big domino. This is the last big thing I have to do. And then, basically some paperwork, a little bit of giving the government their pound of flesh, and then I get to go home. So let's go ahead and jump into the episode. Our guest today is recognized as one of the UK's most innovative osteopaths with a special interest in strength and movement prescription for optimal aging and pain management. He is an expert in older age strength, providing his expertise to multiple healthy aging-focused projects, as well as working with elite performers of the arts and sports arenas. As a second-generation firefighter serving operationally during the 90s and 2000s, he became the youngest person to attain the rank of sub-officer in the London Fire Brigade. After 15 years of frontline duty, a career-ending spinal injury forced him to change course. He discovered osteopathy, first as a way of dealing with his own injuries, then realizing how life-changing the practice of movement, balance, and strength can be. He trained as an osteopath and threw himself into the world of academia. As an authority on older age strength and resilience, he now provides strategic advice on exercise and activity to leading UK charities and develops resources for healthy aging projects within the government, private sector, and third sectors. With no further ado, here's David Vaux. David, welcome to 40 Plus Fitness.
Hi, Allan. Thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here.
So your book has my favorite word in it. Has two of my favorite words in it, actually. Stronger: How to Build Strength, the secret to a longer, healthier life. And we're going to dive into a lot of that, but really, particularly for people over the age of 40, strength training should be a priority. And so I'm glad you put this book together, because for someone that actually maybe doesn't understand strength training very well, I think it's an excellent primer for them to learn what they're supposed to do, how to do it, and why all of this matters.
Yeah, thanks, Allan. That was exactly the idea for writing the book, was to try to take a novice, someone who hasn't potentially been exposed to strength training, resistance training, weight training, whatever you want to call it, and give them a starting point. I try to frame it like a couch to 5K for strength training, to take someone from the couch to a point where they can join a gym, work with someone like yourself, or continue training from home with own bodyweight exercises. So, it's just, it was in effect to be a springboard, if you like, an activator to get people. I mean, particularly, I didn't want to write a book for people who already know what they're doing, although I'm sure that there's lots in here that people who've been training all their lives would potentially learn, I hope. But this was more for those complete novices, because that's where I think the real challenge lies in what we both do.
Well, there definitely are some concepts in the book that are good for people that even we've been doing it for a while. You get some concepts in the book that I think are really important for us to make sure that we're zeroing in on, because for a lot of us, we start lifting and then the ego gets in the way, and then we're dealing with a bigger problem. So there's a lot in the book for just about anybody.
Yeah, I've been there. All right. It's written from experience.
Yes, me too. Ego's been my enemy more times than it's helped me in the gym. It works well in other parts of my life, but in the gym, I have to leave the ego in the car. It doesn't go inside with me.
Glad to hear it.
Okay, so in the book, you came up with you started talking about healthspan and strength span. I've heard lifespan and health span being compared quite a bit lately, as people are, we can live longer because medication's keeping us alive longer, but our health span doesn't always last as long as our lifespan, and that's not a good situation. But then you introduced the concept strength span relative to health span. Can you talk a little bit about those?
Yes, so it's a relatively simple premise that I strongly believe that without that investment in our strength, similar, akin to a pension investment, then our older age will not be the one, and our retirement in particular will not be the one we had hoped for. I believe that you can't have health span without a parallel strength investment, so what I call strength span, that ideally, if you've been working out all your life, you continue to, but especially in midlife, for me, and also a lot of the research underwrites the fact that midlife is one of the most optimal points and one of the most important points that to get this message. There is still time in midlife to invest in our strength pensions and to build our strength span. You're quite right, because the way I look at it, people have got the memo about steps and cardiovascular training, getting our steps in, getting our cardio on, getting our sweat on. But what's been lost and what is often ignored, and the missing part in the fitness pie, is strength training. And people are often shocked, even if they are very competitive cardiovascular athletes in whatever genre that might be, to learn, they're not going to be protected as well as they could have been if they had put strength training into part of their exercise recipe as well. And they will not be protected from osteoporosis in the same way. They will not be protected from sarcopenia. They will not be protected from frailty in the same way as if they had added in strength training. In very simplistic terms, good cardiovascular fitness adds years to life. But we don't want those years of life in the end to be dictated by the four walls within which you find yourself sitting. And so the reps, the strength, the resistance, the weight training adds life to those years. And so if we can get the recipe right, steps and reps, then we've got something that's going to carry the majority of us who do that through to an independent, healthy, happy life in your own home, and one in which you can say yes to the fun things in life, like hanging out with your friends and your family and traveling. So strength span is all wrapped up in that concept, because strength span, I hope, is adopted by by people generally, because I do feel that it's as important as health span.
Yeah, I was at a holiday. I took a vacation in Puerto Vallarta, and when I was arriving there was an earthquake. And so when I got to the resort, everybody at the resort was out front. They had vacated the space, and they had the engineers in there looking around to make sure that it was still safe. It was safe for people to go back in.
Yeah.
And there was this woman, and she was like near panic. And I walked up to her because everybody else was just kind of joking around because they'd been sitting by the pool watching the water slosh everywhere. But she was upset. So I went over and asked her what was wrong. And she said her husband was still in the building. He didn't have the leg strength to walk down the stairs.
Oh my goodness.
And the elevator was offline. And
Wow.
and you have to do that because this is an earthquake. You don't want to be in an elevator if another one comes through. So he was stuck. And they had to send two big burly guys back there to help him down the stairs. But she was in a near panic because they ran out of the room without their phones, and then he couldn't go down the stairs. So she had to leave him there.
There's a real-time example.
And I think about that. Yeah, I think about that all the time. It's just a little bit of building leg strength would have gone so far to this guy, because I don't know that they'll ever want to stay in a resort where they can't stay on the ground floor, if they even travel anymore.
I hear you. Yeah. That's,
it's a big deal.
Yeah. And often my previous career that I had before I was an osteopath and strength and conditioning advisor was as a firefighter. And so we would be often sent in to carry people out of buildings. We'd often be called to people who are on the floor for no other reason than they haven't got the strength to get back up onto their chair. And it's absolutely heartbreaking because, in many cases, in many cases, frailty, which is often seen as inevitable, is absolutely preventable in many cases. As you say, a little bit of investment in leg strength work, and also to highlight the importance of leg strength, because we lose our leg muscles at an exponential rate, and it's usually our leg function, i.e. can you get off and on of a chair, a toilet, or in and out of the beds or up the stairs, are often the defining factors in deciding whether you can stay at home or have to go into some sheltered accommodation. So well worth the investment, I would say. Never skip leg day.
Never skip leg day. So, David, in the book, you brought up a concept I thought that was really, really good. You called it the strength bucket list. Could you go over what that is and how we could go about building our own strength bucket list?
I mean, it came about because in my work in the UK, I often advise on the UK government Healthy Aging Challenge, which is all about improving quality of life at the end of life. And so I work on general projects that look into why people aren't exercising, why people aren't doing strength training. How can we change people's ambivalence to the messaging that's out there? Because we all know, more so now, that the messaging is out there. We should be exercising, we should be doing strength training, but yet only about 10% of people actually strength train in the UK, approximately. It's probably the same globally, I would have thought. And what we know doesn't work is hitting people with a big stick and saying, this is what's going to happen to you if you don't do it. What I've found to be more effective in the projects I've worked on and in working one-on-one in people in my clinic is to try and get them to tell me where they want to be when they're 80. Where do they want to be in their lives? What goals and aspirations do they have? And they're going to be nice aspirations. They're going to be positive aspirations. And so, very simply put, in the process of writing something down, having been asked a question, I found it to be a powerful catalyst for change. Because ultimately, people can read the book, they can see this podcast, But there is nothing more powerful than an idea. There's nothing stronger in terms of behavior change than having the ability to connect with a story, to having the ability to visualize something and to identify with something. So a lot of the work that I do in those projects is actually helping people identify themselves with a pathway, with a story, with an outcome, which isn't a negative one, because what I've found doesn't work is scaring people. But actually what really works is, well, if you do this, you're going to be independent. If you do this, you're going to be playing with your grandchildren. You're going to be going hiking in your 80s, in the Andes. You're going to be exploring cities in your retirement, and you're not going to be worried about getting special assistance at the airport. You're not going to be limited in that way, because that's what's up for grabs. And so what this was turning the normal process of got to do this because this is a problem and here's a solution is actually, let's just go to the nice stuff first. Let's just let's frame this. Let's not talk about sarcopenia and muscle loss too much, although that is in there. Let's not talk about osteoporosis and the danger of falling too much, although that's in there. Let's actually talk about the good stuff. Let's talk about preventing all of that and go straight to the good stuff. So that's in a very simple manner. That's why I put it in there, because I felt that if we can get people to write it down, it's the first step to overcoming their fear or ambivalence to taking up something like strength training.
Yeah. In the book, you got into a topic I think is really important, because I've seen some of the studies, but grip strength is a pretty big determinant of all risk mortality. I've seen some studies on that. But why is grip strength so important?
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? If you've read some of the studies, you know that they're not always sure exactly what the relationship is. I mean, when you listen to other commentators on this, they often, and I do disagree to a point with this, is that they often say that grip strength in an older person is a proxy for the life they've led, in terms of they've lifted, they've pushed, pulled, carried, they've been active with their hands, which generally means they've built up resistance to work against. So in very basic terms, we could say that grip strength is a proxy for an active life, a life in which you have had resistance to push, pull, carry, lift, lower against. But actually, when we think about the neurology of strength, when we think about the nervous system and that, so because we've obviously got the musculoskeletal muscular system, but we've also got the central nervous system. And when we think about central nervous system, you can look at a diagram which is a representation of your body within your brain, within something called the sensory homunculus, which is just here. It's paired on both sides. And it's no coincidence, I don't think, that the representation in your brain for your hand is outsized compared to your face, your lips, your shoulder, your arm, your feet. So the more important things in your body are outside. So your lips are bigger, your genitalia are bigger, your hands are bigger. And that, in many ways, and your eyes are bigger in that representation. But things like your shoulders, your chest, your abs, your thigh muscles are not. And so on a very basic neurological level, that's our brain saying that these are the things that we prioritize. These are the things that define us as humans. And I know that there is also some really fascinating work out there that indicates that if we challenge ourselves with consistency, if we do difficult things, then it sends a message to our deep cellular self. So you might, it could be the telomeres, it could be the brain, the sensory homunculus. But we know from observing older people who age very well that they do challenging things. Now, most challenging things in regards to resistance training involve a grip. And so on a very basic level, I think that we get more bang for our buck if we do train our grip. If we train our grip via things like farmer's carry or taking up climbing or bouldering indoors, which all have an overemphasis on grip, then I think there's an advantage there in aging. And this is why it's one of the fundamental, I give 2 examples of exercises for grip in my book, because all the exercises in my book are weighted against what I feel the importance that they give to longevity and health span. So yeah, grip is a fascinating one. I think it is not to be underestimated, and I think it's still not fully understood. But we do know, as you say, from independent research, if you are grip tested in your mid-40s and you have a higher grip than average, you are highly likely to be in good physical health in your mid-60s. And that's been proven time and time again via the research. So not to be underestimated, and certainly something that I prioritize myself.
Now, strength and pain, those two words go together quite a bit. I think, someone who's just started lifting and someone who's just going to either use this book, I think you do a really good job of talking about DOMS. Could you just go over what DOMS is and what's going on? And
Yeah, sure. So as you know, DOMS is delayed onset muscle soreness, and often comes on the day after or sometimes a few days after strength training. But it can come on after any kind of athletic exertion. So you might have gone for a hike, you might have been playing a sport, and that's the feeling, that's the tension, the soreness, sometimes the tightness and aching you feel in your muscles that you've used in that session. So potentially, if you're doing bench press or press ups, you'd expect to feel it in your front of your shoulders, your chest and your triceps, back of your arms. I'll give you a good example in the book where I haven't played tennis in nearly 20 years. I played tennis, and the next day I could hardly walk because my bum muscles were absolutely smoking on fire because I'd moved them in different ways. And so it's an indicator of where you've worked. It's an indicator of how you've worked. Sometimes you can use DOMS as a measure of targeting. Is your technique, if you're trying to target a specific area and it isn't aching, then it can sometimes tell you maybe it needs a bit of coaching to get that technique right, because we all sometimes fall out of the right technique. What I would say about DOMS is that I put it in the book because I didn't want it to be a barrier to people taking up strength training with regularity, because one of the things that often will stop someone short and will leave them not to come back to strength training is they're scared of this pain. They're scared of getting injured, quite rightly. They're scared of this new feeling they've got, or maybe they've overdone it. And in many cases, we have overdone it. I'm sure you, Allan, and I can both say that, it's something that we're very familiar with. But if you're a novice, not so much. So the rationale between putting it into the book was to try to help people understand it, because once they understand it, they can understand that it's nothing to be scared of. In fact, it can be a tool which we can use. Having said that, it's not a necessary thing to experience. We don't always have to experience it. It's not, because I'm not actually promoting people pushing themselves to failure or to real fatigue in my training. What I want to do is get people up to a 7 or 8 out of 10, not going to failure. So in many cases, once you come through your novice stage, if you're following that kind of regime, you're not going to get a lot of delayed onset of muscle soreness, especially if you are doing the right things. So if you're recovering, you're sleeping, you're hydrating, you're mobilizing, all these things can be managed. But as a novice, you are going to have, it's more or less guaranteed that you're going to have some of this experience. And so it's there, it's a normal reaction. If you have something that's over a 4 or 5 out of 10 in terms of pain, or it lasts for 4 or 5 days, then you're not doing yourself any good, because then you're going to not be training again for a week and actually find yourself getting weaker over time. So the key is not to train to the point more than so that it gives you that week when when you can't walk around, you're hobbling around. In the early stages, it's something that one has to experiment with because everybody is different. But it's there in the early stages as a tool almost to know if you've done too much, because we don't want to do so much that it then negates us coming back again too soon. But in a nutshell, it's nothing to be scared of. It's just a normal biological response. This is when our body is repairing. This is when the myofilaments in our muscles are responding and drawing nutrients to them and then expanding and growing. So it's all part of the process. But what is often misunderstood is that if you have what you feel is a decent exercise session with strength, and then you don't feel DOMS, that doesn't mean that you're not growing and getting stronger and improving. It probably means you've nailed it, that you've got it exactly right. So it's a tricky one to get over to people. But again, I'm glad you felt that I've had a reasonable swing at it in the book, because it is something that does need to be explained to people who are new to this.
Yeah, and it kind of flies in the face. But back in the 80s and 90s, I did a lot of training, and back then it was no pain, no gain. That was the mantra when you went in the gym. And if you didn't have that soreness, you obviously didn't work hard enough, which was not true, but it was what was in all the magazines. It's what everybody believed. It was the bro science. So we don't have to train to the point of pain. We just need to train to the point where the muscle is taxed.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm the poster boy. I was a poster boy in my 20s and 30s and 40s for no pain, no gain. We would push ourselves very hard in the fire service training. We would push ourselves very hard. I was a rower as well, competitively for 15 years, and we would push ourselves very, very hard to the point of collapse and unconsciousness in some points. But you've got to, at some point, realize that actually this is detrimental to performance. This is detrimental to longevity and health span. And, the amount of times I see people in my clinic who continue into their 30s and 40s with that mindset and get injured. And so, no pain, no gain is not a helpful one. What elite athletes know, they spend 80% of their time in lower states of training to recover. They do their programming. They spend a lot of time looking at sleep and nutrition, not just hammering themselves, which is often all you see when you're looking on social media or when you see a sports person performing. You see them hammering themselves then, because they're only actually going to be doing it for 5 to 10% of their careers, as in working that hard. The rest of the time they're sub maximal. So it's a trap that 99% of people who aren't elite athletes fall into. And it's certainly humbling when you realize that a lot of the real advantages in strength, in cardiovascular training, in flexibility can be done with a little bit less volume and a little bit less intensity, and still get fantastic, long-lasting, risk-free results, which is basically, again, one of the things I try to promote is in midlife, it's absolute kryptonite to get an injury. And it's more or less guaranteed if you're a hard-charging athlete who works out and doesn't get the memo that I've just described, then there is going to be one or two things. There's going to be either burnout, which is that chronic fatigue where you have a decreasing health, decreasing performance and decreasing health levels, or you get an injury, which if it's a serious injury like an Achilles or like a shoulder injury will probably mean surgery. But that's 2 years potentially to get back often. Maybe a bit less with the right coaching, but then that's 2 years of consistency training that you might have missed out on. So, I often say as well to the people I'm working with is that in midlife, it's consistency that is our superpower, not going hard. It's consistency. It's being able to turn up every week. And sometimes people don't want to hear that, but certainly when the penny drops, it's a game changer. Certainly I've had to go through my fair share of injuries, life-changing injuries, often industrial injuries, to actually have to think through how to train around certain immobilities and injuries. But then sharing that message with the general population is often a hard sell, because that 99% of people buy into the fact, well, if I want to get quickly fit, I want to lose weight quickly, if I want to get strong quickly, surely I go harder. And it's not as simple as that, as we both know, Allan. It's actually about, as you said, leaving your ego at the door and then doing your work.
Absolutely. Now, you introduced a concept that I think is really important, and I've not seen anybody talk about this in any resistance training book that I've ever read. So when you brought this up, I was like, That's brilliant. I'm glad you did that. It's called the pain gate.
Hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about the pain gate and
Yeah.
why that's if understanding I think is important for us to know where our line is, because there are going to be times, like you said, when we're sore because we pushed
Hmm.
ourselves. There's going to be times when we went a little too hard, or maybe we did get a minor injury, not necessarily even doing the workouts, but just picking up the groceries or picking up a
Hmm.
grandchild or something. What is the pain gate and how can we use that effectively?
That's a great question. So the pain gate it's a theory. So it's called the pain gate theory, and it is based in neurology, neuroscience, and in a very it was first kind of plotted and suggested in 1965 by the original researchers were Melzack and Wall. So everyone wants to look that up. It's a research program project, and there's a paper online. In later years, there is some work done by an Australian physiotherapist called Lorimer Moseley and a gentleman called David Butler, who wrote a book called Explain Pain, which is a fantastic go-to for anyone who's interested in how the body moves and how the body responds to pain. So, in a nutshell, if we think about pain being in our brain, first of all, pain is not in, the thumb you just hit with a hammer. It's actually being felt here. And to get here from your thumb or from your toe you just stubbed, or from your aching back from a hard workout, it has to travel up the spinal cord. Now, when it comes in from the peripheral nerves into the central nervous system, i.e. the spinal cord, and then comes up, it will travel up. Now, on an evolutionary sense, we think what's happened is that the pain gate has been put there to help us. So if we visualize a cross-section of the spine in our lower backs that is going to pick up on me stubbing my toe, it's going to come up my leg and into that section. Now, when it comes into that section, it's going to then cross over and go up normally and cross over into the other side of my brain and into that homunculus, that sensory homunculus where the toe is. And I'll be thinking, oh, what's going on with that? I've stubbed it. That's very painful. Now, what we've found is that if you can mobilize, if you can move, if you can distract that section with something, then it will lessen the message going up. And a good example of this is if a child falls over and bashes their knee, a young child, how many times have you seen a mum or dad rubbing the knee of the child and that child being okay after a few minutes? And that's that rubbing, that sensation that's coming in to that same area that's injured is going to be a distraction to the pain. It's going to lessen the pain and it's going to decrease the sensations that are able to go up the brain to tell you that there's something going on. If I'll give you another example, there's a very famous story of a labourer standing on a 6-inch nail and the nail goes through their boots. And this labourer on a building site absolutely loses it. They're in absolute agony. The paramedics who turned up could not take the boot off in situ to look. They had to transport this individual to a hospital whilst on gas and air, and they had to give them pethidine, which is a strong painkiller, just to calm them down before the surgeon finally came in and cut around the nail to remove the boot. It's only to find that the nail had gone through the gap between the toes and hadn't actually gone through the foot at all. The individual was not injured in any way, but because the individual was at a heightened state of anxiety, of panic and fear, they absolutely believed that the pain was coming up and it was there. And so it's a good example of anxiety, of other mental states opening the pain gate wider than it needs to. And I talk about this in the book, in that we all, in some point in our lives, will have pain. We all will have injury. And we can all do ourselves a lot of good by actually having a different sort of relationship to the pain. Yes, we acknowledge it. Pain is normally a request for change in something that we're doing or something that we've done wrong in terms of overtraining or not being good with mobility. But if we have an injury in particular, the concept of someone trying to relax, the concept of our mental health. Are we anxious? Are we stressed? Are we unrested? Are we sleeping? Do we have anxiety? All these things. If the answers to any of those questions is yes, then it will increase the pain we feel. Not because, as the old adage says, pain is only in your head often. Well, actually, pain is in the nervous system. Pain is in the brain. And if we can de-escalate some of the factors affecting our brain, then we will feel less pain. So it's a mindset thing, but it's a neurological thing as well. So the most practical way of using the pain gate to our advantage, obviously I'll give one where if we have a grandchild or a child who bangs their elbow, you rub it, it gets better, because neurology in real time will diffuse that message coming through that segment of the spine. But as older athletes and as people who are training, if we do have an injury, if we do have pain, and often we can decrease that over time by working on mindset, by working on our levels of anxiety, by working on our recovery, and in that recovery, working on our sleep. Because an unslept brain is a brain that's highly, highly aroused and charged. And so it's going to over-exaggerate most things. It's not just the brain, it's also the spinal cord as well. And so all these things are there for the taking if we want to go through life with a bit less pain, a bit less aching. So recovery and mindset are key to the closing that pain gate. I mean, I put it in the book because also it's really fascinating, isn't it? That there are these mechanisms in place. If we only knew they were there, there is mechanism in place in our nervous system, which I believe is an evolutionary artifact that's left over, that's there to help us.
Yeah. In the book, okay, so you did a really good job of putting together a workout plan. And the plan is taking someone, like you said, from pretty much from the couch to having a full resistance program that serves them in obtaining the things they want from their bucket list. But you had 10 lifts, 10 foundational lifts in the book, and there were 3 levels to the program. Could you kind of just walk us through what those 10 lifts are and then what the 3 levels are so someone can get a kind of a broad view picture of what your program looks like?
Yeah, so first thing to say about that is that I chose and weighted the exercises in order of importance, in order of what we're likely to face in life. So everything is quite functional, and also in a way to fully protect the entire body. So sort of future-proofing every major joint in every major movement that we're likely to experience. You probably noticed that there are no kind of movements that would isolate a muscle. These are all what we call compound, as you know, compound movements, which are multi-joint, multi-muscle movements, which frankly are the ones I believe that are best for preparing us for a long, healthy life. So the movements were on the upper body. I broke them down to core, lower body, and grip strength. So there were 4 for the upper body, which were pushing above your head and pulling down. So the push above your head would be a shoulder press upwards, and then a pulling, so the opposite. So one and then the opposite. The pulling would have eventually, ultimately, for most people, would be, using a band from above, or hopefully, if they progress, a pull-up. So again, fantastic movements. The other one for upper body was pushing, horizontally pushing, and then horizontally pulling. So again, the opposite movement around the joints of the shoulder, push and pull again. For the core, I like plank, and I like plank variations. Although, if someone wanted to do more, they're very welcome to. But the idea behind the 10 was to give, in effect, what is a simplistic, simple program to get one started. Lower body. Now, there were 3 for lower body. There was a hip hinge, which is, potentially, I break lower body into hip, thigh, and ankle, but knee and ankle. But obviously, the 3 one chooses, if we're trying to cover most of those, is squat, hip thrust, and lunge. And then for grip, within which, again, I weight that quite heavily as importance. There are two. So one being a grip and hold, which is either, which we can progress to a dead hang, and potentially also a farmer's hold or farmer's walk, which again, I think is not just grip, it's an all over body move, and also fantastic. As an aside, it's a fantastic exercise for preventing falls and foot stability. But yeah, those are the 10. And in terms of the three movements, well, I'll probably give you an example. Should we just take, most people are familiar with a bench press, a press up. So that would be the horizontal push. So the reason I put 3 levels in is because we need to be able to, as novices, we need to be able to progress and regress if we need to. We need to be able to get someone a starting point, even if you are detrained and you haven't done anything for years and years and years, or if ever. So you can start someone, instead of starting them on a press up, which they're probably going to injure themselves on, you start them doing the press up position against the wall while standing. And once they can get to a certain point of competence, once they can do 4 sets of 10 doing that, and they feel like they've got a bit more in the tank, they can progress to the next one. The next one in that movement would be a box press up, which is when you're on all fours, you're in a all four position, and instead of putting your legs behind you, you then do the press up movement. Once you can do 4 sets of 10 of that, and you feel like you've progressed and you have a bit more capacity, you then go to the full press up. And if you really want to progress, you can go and use a bench. You can invest in a bench or go to a gym and start doing bench press with dumbbells or a bar, or you can stay at home and you can keep using your own body weight, and you can elevate your feet up behind you onto your chair or sofa, which, let me tell you, is no joke. Actually, I think most people who even go to the gym would find, sets of that really challenging. So the premise behind the 10, the reason I chose the 10 that I chose is because these are the ones that I feel best serve those goals of healthy aging, of building some functional hypertrophy, of building the movements in to protect all the major joints. And I weighted them against their importance. So you'll notice with leg and hip especially, that's highly weighted, as are the grip. And the reason that the grip, coming back to your earlier question, it's not just about the neurological or the effects you get from working on your grip. It's not just about the fact that you're highly likely with a good grip to have been active in your life. But if you think about an 85-year-old woman or man at home with a poor grip, they're not going to be able to cook for themselves even. Cutting a loaf of bread, opening a tin of food, just holding something to put it into the oven, dressing oneself, unwrapping packaging or something screwing in a wire to something, just doing. Our hands are so important. Our hands and our ability to be dexterous with them is what, in many cases, defines us as human beings. And on a very basic evolutionary level, if we can keep our grip strength, it's so important for our chances of an independent life in older age, as is being able to get up from a chair. So, in a very broad brush sense, the book lays out, I wouldn't call it a minimal dose program, but it is a simplistic program. But it is a program which, if you tweak and play around with, you can do for the rest of your life if you wanted to. Because, frankly, if I was to stop all the exercise I've done over my life, and you were to stop all the exercise you've done over your life, and someone read the book and started, and they're our age, and we stop and they start, they win at age 80. They will be winning the long game of aging. And I try to relay that to people who are novices and they haven't done anything, and just say, well, look, if you don't do anything, then, you're going to potentially have a challenging time. But if you do something, the future will take care of itself. If you just sprinkle in some of those exercises in the book. But frankly, you've probably seen the more recent edition, Alan. And I'm a big advocate for strength snacking as well. I'm a big advocate for filling your dead time in your day with an isometric hold. An isometric, for people listening who don't know, is those static holds that we do. So, the old-fashioned one where you might be going on a skiing holiday and you'll hold a static squat against the wall, with your back against the wall. These are gold dust, absolute gold dust for improving ligament and tendon strength. And actually in the book, I ask people, to put themselves, are they novices? Have they done much before? But most people reading the book are asked to do a good few weeks on what I've called the minimal loading program, which you probably also saw, which is a series of isometric holds, similarly chosen for upper body, mid, lower body, to ensure before we start doing anything too dynamic in terms of the program, that your tendons and ligaments are strengthened as well. Because it's often the case that people have a ligament or tendon issue because they haven't actually given their body time for their tendons and ligaments to adapt. Because tendons and ligaments take longer to adapt to resistance training than our muscles do. So, yeah, a slight segue there, but there's a real beauty in isometric work as well.
Well, they also take longer to heal when you mess them up. So it's
100%.
It's a win-win for you to get yourself up to speed before you really start adding too much load. Yeah. So, yes, David, I define wellness as being the healthiest, fittest, and happiest you can be. What are 3 strategies or tactics to get and stay well?
Yeah, I love your philosophy. I do agree, completely agree. I think from my perspective and in relation to, our conversation, I would start with, I'm a great believer in post-it notes around the house to affect change, to remind you, because we're all busy, especially in midlife. And one of the things I ask people to put around the house is frailty is optional. I also ask them to put something else on there, which is, for instance, give yourself permission to be middle-aged. And what I mean by that is that in any program, we're often hamstrung by failing. Giving yourself permission to be middle-aged means that in midlife, we're going to be busy, we're going to be injured, we're going to be ill, or our family members are going to be all of that. We can be pulled away from our training via work or by travel or by whatever it is. And often people who have signed up to a program which is hard charging, go hard or go home, pain is weakness leaving the body, the type of thing, Allan. Often people won't come back once they've stopped because they think, well, I'm off the hamster wheel now, I can't get back on it. So one of the important messages to give yourself in midlife is permission to be middle-aged. We're not all in the SAS, we're not all in Navy SEALs. We are normal people trying to be stronger for older age. So giving yourself permission just means, just like eating healthy most of the time, drinking healthy limits most of the time, if we return to a program which has control, which has challenge, but which has consistency, then most of the time we're going to be just fine. It means that the future will take care of itself. So if we do that 80% of the time, it's not a failure to leave it a week or to be ill for a month. It's not a failure. And as long as we keep coming back and plugging away, then that's a superpower, giving ourselves permission to be middle-aged. Number 2, so that's number 1. Number 2, I've already mentioned it, but it's, if you need to, then make a start with strength snacking. And there's a big section in the book about strength snacking. Strength snacking, as we've discussed, is fabulous. It's gold dust for the ability to strengthen our connective tissues, our ligaments and tendons. And as long as they do a few weeks or a few months of that and then start to do a little bit more and push themselves a little bit more every time, then over the time, as long as you're following what I call the 3 C's, that's control, that's challenge, but it's sensible challenge, so it's within a control framework, and that's consistency, then again, the future is going to take care of itself because you're not going to get injured. Because injury in midlife is kryptonite to later life health. And I guess finally, my non-negotiables are around grip strength, as you picked up on, and around some kind of leg exercise. Now, if it comes to it, you can get the post-it notes out again. And often I just tell people, look, if you're busy and you can't get to the gym, we can't do it, every time you sit down, do it in slow motion. So sit down slowly. It's a bit of a cliche, but if everyone in middle age started to sit down slowly and count to 6 in their heads, wherever they are, in the office, at home, on the toilet even, sitting down slowly, as you know, it's an eccentric, long lengthening contraction of the thigh muscles and hip muscles. Gold dust. Absolute gold dust. So if we just did that, work on our grip, sit down slowly, we're going to be just fine. As a starting point, ideally, I want more for people. I want people to then work with people like yourself, or join a gym, or work with other people, or just carry on. But those are my kind of non-negotiables, I would say. Yeah.
David, if someone wanted to learn more about you, learn more about your book, Stronger, where would you like for me to send them?
So they can find me on Instagram. So that's just type my name into Instagram, David Vaux, and I'll come up. So yeah, there's a link to the book on there. I believe the book is now out on Amazon as well in the US, certainly is in the UK. And I also have a website called strongerconsulting.org. So you can certainly get a message to me there as well. I'll be happy to share that with you, Allan, later on.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for being a part of 40 Plus Fitness.
Thanks, Allan. It's been an honor.
If you enjoyed today's show, take a moment to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And if you would, please leave a rating and review on your podcast player of choice. Next time on the 40 Plus Fitness podcast, we meet Louis Bisek and discuss his book, Saving Men from Themselves, 20 Proven Tactics with a New Approach to Living Healthy for Men Over 50. Until then, have a happy and healthy week.